Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of If I'm Being Honest. I think one of the biggest problems that we're having right now is that people have stopped trying to understand each other. Everything feels immediate nowadays. Someone says the wrong thing, reacts emotionally, they make a mistake, or maybe they disappoint us. And within minutes, people have already decided what that person is. We build entire narratives about human beings based off single moments. And I think we've become far too comfortable judging people we barely understand. We need to engage in curiosity and empathy before going straight to judgment. And this sentence has been heavily sitting with me, and I would like it to sit heavily with you guys as well, because I started realizing how different life feels when you approach people with curiosity instead of assumption. Curiosity asks questions before making conclusions. It asks, what could I be missing? What might this person be carrying that you don't know about? What experiences shaped them into the person they are? Because the truth is, people are complicated. Everyone is carrying things silently. Some people are grieving, some people are feeling overwhelmed, and some people are trying to survive mechanisms that they developed years ago. Some people were never taught how to communicate properly, how to regulate their emotions properly, and yet we expect perfection from people while knowing how deeply flawed we ourselves are. And I think that's what's always fascinated me about human beings. Every single one of us wants understanding when we're struggling. Yet we often fail to extend that courtesy to other people. When we make mistakes, we want people to consider what our intentions were. When we're distant, we want people to ask if we're okay. And when we fail, we want room to grow above it. However, when someone disappoints us, we often go straight to judgment. And I don't even think people do this because they're inherently cruel. In fact, I think the opposite. I think people are inherently good. But I think sometimes judgment feels emotionally easier. Judgment creates distance. It makes us feel safer, and it allows us to separate ourselves from other people's flaws. And we convince ourselves that we would never react the same way. But life is never so black and white. Good people can hurt others. Emotionally intelligent people can still make selfish decisions sometimes. And people with kind hearts can still react in a bad way when they're feeling overwhelmed or scared. What I'm trying to say is being human is complicated. And I think social media has made it worse because it's conditioned us to believe that people should either be completely good or completely cruel. And it's like there's no room for contradiction, growth, or nuance. It's like the second someone disappoints us, their entire character gets rewritten. But I don't think human beings were ever meant to survive in that kind of pressure. None of us could survive being permanently defined by our worst moment. And that is why empathy matters so much. Empathy doesn't excuse harmful behavior. Accountability absolutely matters, and boundaries matter, and consequences matter as well. But there's a difference between accountability and dehumanization. One says what you did wasn't okay, and the other one says you are irredeemable because of it. And those are not the same thing at all. I think empathy requires far more emotional maturity than judgment does. Judgment is easy, but empathy takes effort. Empathy asks us to stop long enough to consider context, to acknowledge that we don't fully know what someone is carrying internally, to remember that people are responding from places that we can't see or even begin to understand sometimes. And honestly, I think that's one of the hardest parts about empathy, because it forces you to take a look at yourself as well. Because when you acknowledge other people's humanity, you also have to acknowledge your own imperfections. We have to admit that we've also had moments that we wouldn't want permanently defining us. Moments where we did react poorly, where we could have handled things better, and versions of ourselves that we aren't proud of. And that is an uncomfortable pill to swallow. But discomfort is a part of growth. In fact, I think that a very few things that are worthwhile in life come without a cost. Deep relationships, they cause vulnerability. Growth causes discomfort. Honesty can cost rejection sometimes. Forgiveness costs pride, and healing costs patience. Even empathy has a cost because it requires emotional energy. It requires us to move beyond our ego and the need to always feel like that you're right. And I think people avoid empathy because judgment feels much more efficient. But efficiency doesn't always mean wisdom. Some of my most meaningful relationships only survived because someone chose understanding me instead of condemning me, or because someone paused long enough to ask questions instead of immediately deciding who I was based on my actions. And I try to remember that when I'm frustrated with people now, because nobody wants to feel instantly condemned. People People want to be seen, people want the space to grow, and people want to feel understood. And I honestly think that's part of the reason why the world feels so emotionally exhausted. Everyone feels constantly evaluated, constantly misunderstood, constantly one mistake away from rejection. We've created an environment where people are terrified to be imperfect publicly. But growth has never come from shame alone. And the people who changed my life were never the people who judged me the fastest, but they were the people who created enough safety for me to be honest about who I was. The people who corrected me without humiliating me, and the people who reminded me that making mistakes and being worthy of love can exist at the same time. And maybe that's the kind of people we should want to become too. People who choose curiosity before assumption, empathy before cruelty, and understanding before judgment. Because at the end of the day, every single one of us is trying to navigate life with the emotional tools we currently have. And I think we owe each other a little bit more humanity than we've been giving lately. And I think the world becomes a little softer when we stop asking who deserves understanding and start remembering that we all do. See you guys next week.